Yes. So it is also a part of the later Vedic phase only. So what we have got to know, we have got to know that for the Vedic period, we have literary sources largely in Rigveda, Samved, Yajurved, Atharvaved forms. These all are called as the Vedas. Fine. Even apart from the Vedas, we have some other textbooks as well, like Brahmanas. All right. So Brahmanas are other textbooks which also support our understanding of the Vedic period, especially the later Vedic period. Fine. To understand the Vedic literature, it is always recommended to also read the Brahmanas, because Brahmanas are the textbooks which actually gives us information regarding the rituals and the philosophies that were being followed there in the Vedic era. That is the significance of the Brahmanas. Fine. So you see, you have the Vedic text, then you also have Brahmanas. Brahmanas are the part of the later Vedic text. Again repeating, for Rig Veda, or rather for the early Vedic period, we are only having Rig Veda as a source. But for later Vedic phase, that began from 1000 BC onwards, we have plethora of sources, which includes the three Vedas and also the Brahmanas, along with Aranyakas and Upanishads. So you can see on your screen, you also have, along with Brahmanas, Aranyakas and Upanishads. Fine. Now, what is this Aranyakas and what is this Upanishads? See, Aranyakas are another textbooks which are said to have been written in the forest area. Now, in the forest area where the rishi or the monks used to live, and they used to ask their disciples to come over there to know about the secrets, to know about the some secretive information regarding the human life, or regarding the entire earth at that particular point of time. So Aranyakas were basically a sort of a magical textbooks which used to be only, I mean, imparted in the forest, not in the non-forest area. तो मतलब फॉरेस्ट में ही इसकी विद्या दी जाती थी. ठीक है, तो गुरुकुल वगैरह में जो बच्चे जाते थे पढ़ने, तो उनको या तो गुरुकुल अगर फॉरेस्ट के अंदर ही लोकेटेड है तो वहां मिल जाती थी. अगर नहीं लोकेटेड है तो दे हैड टू गो टू द फॉरेस्ट एरिया दैट लिव ओवर देयर along with the gurus, along with the rishis, in fact. And there only they used to impart that particular magical charms or magical informations or the secret informations that was written in Aranyakas. So Aranyakas are also the good source to understand the Vedic literature, particularly the literature like Atharvaved, precisely in fact in that way. All right. Then Upanishads. Now Upanishads are equally very important textbook which provide the information regarding the philosophy of life, or rather the philosophical underpinnings of the Vedic era has been, or rather have been explained very clearly in the Upanishads. So Upanishads, as the name itself suggests, that you have to sit below the Guru to know about the philosophy of Upanishad. So this particular Upanishad training, or rather the education of Upanishads, was given by the rishis, by the gurus, by asking the disciples to sit below the guru seat, or the seat of the gurus, and there only the Upanishad talks were done by the gurus, in fact. So Upanishads were primarily the philosophical textbooks of the Vedic era. It is also said that many of the Upanishads were written towards the end of the Vedic era. Therefore, Upanishads are also called as Vedanta. Vedanta. So Upanishads are also called as Vedanta. All right. So Vedantic thoughts are all about the philosophical thoughts. Fine. So that is how we come to know about Vedantas. Also, that includes the part of Upanishads. Now the point is, what was this text all about? Now let me bring this particular fact in your notice at the outset, that the Aryans were illiterate. Aryans were illiterate. Now when I said Aryans were illiterate, what does it mean? It simply means they didn't know the art of writing. They were not knowing the art of writing. Therefore, these Vedic literatures were basically Shruti literature. Shruti. The Vedic literatures were basically the Shruti literature, that is transmitted from one generation to next generation through the oral teaching, through hearing and the oral teaching. So all the Vedic literature were taught to the disciples in the form of the oral teaching, and the disciples or the students, they were supposed to remember those oral teachings by heart. So they emphasize more upon the memory. So the Vedic education was based more upon the emphasizing the or enhancing the memory power. All right. So therefore, the memory of these people were very sound, because they were trained in how to remember the entire Vedic literature by heart. So they were trained also in the mnemonics, to how to remember the entire Vedic literature. You can understand that only in Rigveda there are 1028 hymns. 1028 hymns. Now remembering even 28 hymns for us is going to be highly difficult and highly tough task. But the people used to remember 1028 hymns by heart. All right, it is only about Rigveda I'm talking about, and you understand there are other Vedas also, and then there are also other texts like Aranyakas, Upanishads, Brahmanas. So they were supposed to remember all these texts by heart. So therefore, at the age of only 7, the children were sent to the Gurukul in the ancient time. Alright, so children were sent to the Gurukul at the age of 7 only, and they had to remain there in the Gurukul with the Guru till their adulthood. And very nicely depicted also in the Ramayana serial. If you have seen the serial of Ramayana, how nicely it is depicted there that these all people like Ram, Lakshman, Bhatta, all were sent to the Gurukul in the childhood only. So they were trained there, and then finally when they became adult, they're asked to go back to their home. All right. So this exactly was the practice. That is what is shown there in Ramayana was basically imprint of the Aryan culture only. Fine. So the idea is, see, this is how the training was being given at that particular point of time. So therefore, the Vedic literature was Shruti literature. When I said Aryans were illiterate, I was very clear in the meaning that I wanted to say that they were not knowing the art of writing. All right, and therefore they only communicated through their language, and that is how it is the oral tradition which kept on passing from one generation to next generation, which continued till today, and I mean, for all of us, in fact, how do we know what was written in Rigveda? We are not trained in our school, neither in our family. So none of in our family or none of our teacher has ever learned Veda. So yet we know that yes, there are Rigveda, later Vedic texts like Samved, Yajurveda, Atharvaveda, whatever, and all these Vedas are having these all the other informations. So how do we know about it? So of course we know it through the history text. That's what actually is our source of information, in fact. Because neither me nor you have got the privilege to read the original textbook, isn't it? But the historians, they did have the access of this or the original textbooks. Fine. So how do they get to know about the original text? So in other words, at certain point of time, it must have been penned down. It must have been penned down. And exactly this was asked to me also in my third interview in UPSC. I was asked this question by one of the gentlemen in UPSC interview. That was a board of Sashi Tripathi man. All right. And he perhaps could not understand what I was tell to him. In fact, he asked me that what was, Vedic literature. So when I started explaining, I said that we come to know Vedic literature, by the writings that has been done. So he got confused. Rather, he wanted me to confuse also. He said that, okay, you want to say that Vedic literature was written? I said, yes, it was written. So he said, no, it was not written. So we have had a sort of a, I would say, a debate for almost a couple of minutes. Then I had to tell him that yes, it was written during the time of the Gupta period. So it was the Gupta period when the Vedic literature was penned down by the then Shias or by the then sages or the Rishi Munis on that point of time. Then only afterwards people started even reading the Vedic knowledge through the textbooks. But somehow he was not convinced. He said, no, it was never written, in fact. So I said, so, but I know that it is written. That's what actually I know about it. Fine. So that's what actually is the point. The point is that he wanted me to accept that it was only Shruti literature. All right. However, I did accept it in Shruti literature. It transmitted from oral to, tradition to tradition through oral tradition only. But at certain point of time, it was penned down for sure. Otherwise, how do me and you know about Vedic literature? So the point is, what you have to remember, that Vedic literature was primarily a Shruti literature only. However, it is penned down for the first time during the Gupta period. So why do we say Gupta period was a classical age of Hinduism, or classical age of even literature in that way, or classical age of culture in that way? It is all due to the various textbooks that we have today, or rather we know about them today. It is due to precisely the contribution of the Guptas in the promotion of the writing part of all those textbooks, which was done elaborately and profoundly during their reign, during their times. So, having said that, you need to understand the Vedas are said to be the direct messages of the God. So, hence, Vedas are also called as Aparushya. Aparushya means not created by man. So, it was the wordings of the God which actually has been transmitted from generation to generation in India. That is how the Vedic literature happens to be the major source for all of us to understand the Vedic period, in fact. Now, the point is, who were the architect of the Vedic period? Who were these people who are known for this Vedic period or Rigveda or Later Veda? From where have they come from? Had they been originated in India only, or were they the outsiders, in fact, in India? See, of course, there are two theories that is in front of us. What we have to understand, the larger theory that subscribe to the view, or there is a consensus among the historians, we have to buy that argument only. Fine, because see, this is a highly debatable topic. Reason being that in today's parlance, if you see the current government's orientation, they will never accept that the Aryans were the people from outside India. All right, but the acceptance and non-acceptance matter on the basis of facts and evidences. So what we have to remember, that whatever evidences we have, on that basis, we come to know that the Aryans were the outsiders. All right, and it is not only on the basis of the premises or the basis of some assumption. It is on the basis of the literary and archaeological evidences supporting this particular theory. because this insider theory does not stand correct, does not hold much water, especially in the context of the development that took place at that particular point of time, not only in India but across the, you can say, subcontinent of India, in fact. See, first of all, who were the Aryans? Let us understand that. See, primarily speaking, Aryans were not race. So we should not confuse Aryans with some race. However, the English historians, the British historians, they pushed this particular theory. The Aryans belonged to a superior race, and they were having a people belonging to a certain race. Therefore, there was a problem in India in the context of the racial conflict between the Aryans and non-Aryans. Now, this is a theory that was given by the British historians. Because see, how history of India has been written, you need to also understand that historiography of India. History of India was not written by the Indians themselves. In fact, let me tell you one thing at the outset. It was written by the Britishers primarily, and Britishers wrote this history in such a manner to prove their point they are correct or they are justified in ruling over India. Because the people out there in India, they were having huge differences among each other, and there were racial connotation also in India. They were uncivilized people. So therefore, it was a moral obligation on the Britishers to rule over India to make them civilized. That is how they justify their rule over India. So in that context only, whatever history was written about India, it was influenced by that colonial hangover. Fine. So they used to prove that Aryans were a racial group that entered India in a very aggressive manner. All right. But when history of India was written by the Indians only, they proved it slightly incorrect, in fact. Then they tried to prove it slightly incorrect that yes, Aryans were definitely, they came from outside. Now, even Bal Gangadhar Tilak, also accepted the Aryans came from Central Asia. So, I mean, this is what you can understand from a perspective of a nationalist like a Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Fine. Then when you see the emergence of the Marxist historians, especially people like D.D. Kosambi, R.S. Sarma, D.N. Jha, Romila Thapar, Irfan Habib. So these are the Marxist historians. Always Satish Chandra, Bipin Chandra, they are all the Marxist historians, in fact. Now these people, when they started exploring history of India, then they came out with a lot of evidences to prove their point, in fact. All right. So they proved their point that yes, Aryans were the outsiders. Then who were the Aryans? So according to them, the Aryans were the people who were having a particular language. They were the group of a linguistic group, basically Indo-European linguistic group. So Aryans were mainly the Indo-European linguistic group. They were not a racial group. So they used to speak a language which was definitely not spoken in India at that particular point of time when they entered India. A language which was highly esoteric. Esoteric means कि सबको समझ में नहीं आने वाला है. All right. So it was highly esoteric, could be comprehended only by the people who understand, or rather who have been brought up under that environment. So they were primarily the Indo-European linguistic group, not a racial group. So they were having this as a language, specific language. Now the point is, कहाँ से आए तब? कौन थे ये लोग? See, all the theories point out one common point, in fact, or rather one common theory. In fact, all the historians, I would say, in that manner, especially I'm talking about the modern historians of independent India. So they all have pointed out that the Aryans had come out from Central Asia. All right. Now, from Central Asia, these people started migrating somewhere around, I mean, 2000, 2500 BCE, in fact, itself. मतलब आज से 4,500 साल पहले की बात है. 4,500 साल पहले there were people there in Central Asia. Now they started migrating towards different parts of the world. So the point is, why would they migrate? See, behind migration, there are many factors. As you know, there are pull and push factors both. Both are applied behind migration. Push factor and pull factor. So the push factor was that these people were the tribal population or tribal people. The being a tribal people, obviously, they were having the intestine or intestine or another internal warfare. Internal warfare was a common activity among themselves. Fine. So in that way, they were pushed towards other areas, especially by the powerful, to slightly weaker ones. That is how the push factor was there that compelled them to move around or move beyond their Central Asian region. Second one was also the pull factor. The pull factor was in the context of Central Asia is not known for very highly fertile soil and highly fertile region. So one thing is absolutely common there, rather it was very much possible there, that with the increase in population, the availability of resources to consume started declining over there. And in search of good pasture, better pasture, green pasture, the people started moving around to other parts of the world. Fine. So what you need to understand, one wave of Aryans, they moved towards European area. If you see the map of Central Asia, if you see the map of Central Asia, you can simply can easily understand that from Central Asia they started moving towards western side. So from western side they reached to, of course, Europe. Some of them also moved towards the northern side. They reached to even Russia in that way. All right. Some of them also moved towards the southern side, in fact. And in the southern side, when they moved, they came down to Iran first, not to India. Iran first. Why not to India? Because of Hindu Kush and Himalayan range. They could not enter through passing through such a high mountainous zone. But from Central Asia to Iran, they were having the access. Area was plain, transportation was easy, movement was easy, and most importantly, they were a proficient horse riders. Proficient horse riders. So they came on the horse firstly to Iran. Fine. So this all development must have been taken place or rather taking place in the world somewhere around 3000 3500 BCE. ये 3000 3500 BCE के आसपास की कहानी बता रहा हूं आपको. ठीक है. अब क्या हुआ कि आप सोचिए कि 3500 BC के आसपास ये ईरान में आके बैठ गए. ठीक. अब ईरान में ये बहुत दिन तक थे. All right. Now from Iran also they were looking to expand their areas to other parts of the world. So by 1500 BCE, or rather I would say before that also, in fact by 2000 BCE, you understand this way. By 2000 BCE also, one of the waves, one of the groups of the so-called Aryans, they moved towards India. All right. And these people, they were not in majority, they were in minority. So the first wave that entered into India of the Aryans or so-called Aryans, they were primarily the people who moved towards India somewhere around 2000 or 2200 BCE. Fine. So they moved into India and they found that, of course, there was already a sort of a culture prevailing in India, that is Harappan culture. Fine. So someone of them or some of them, in fact, got incorporated Harappan culture as, let's say, as a laborer, as a worker, as a servant, or maybe also as a slaves. Fine. So they got incorporated to Harappan culture initially. And why we say that? Because of various proofs that we have now. Now, I told you also in our last class, Symmetry H, Symmetry H graveyard of Harappa. Now we have got a Symmetry H graveyard of Harappa just beside the main center of Harappan city, just beside the fortified area of Harappa. We have got Symmetry H graveyard. And this Symmetry H graveyard, I already mentioned very clearly to all of you that this graveyard was basically some alien people, not of Harappa. Now, this proves the fact that there were some people who also may have started settling down nearby Harappa or maybe outside of Harappa area, maybe somewhere around, let's say, 1800 BC or 1700 BC. तो जब हरप्पा डिक्लाइन के आसपास था और डिक्लाइन के कगार पे था, तो उसी समय कुछ ऐसे भी लोग थे जो बाहर से आके हरप्पा के अंदर तो नहीं घुसे, लेकिन हरप्पा के बाहर वो रह रहे थे, और ये प्रूफ करता है सिमेट्री एच का ग्रेवयार्ड, और यही नहीं प्रूफ करता है. नाउ वी हैव गॉट सम मोर एविडेंसेस, एंड व्हाट इज दैट एविडेंस? Evidence that we have got from Bhagwanpura, Dadheri and Katkolon. Bhagwanpura, Dadheri and Katkolon. Bhagwanpura, Dadheri and Katkolon जगह है जो कि वेस्टर्न यूपी और हरियाणा के बॉर्डर पे है. भगवानपुरा, दाधेरी एंड काटकोलन, KATPALON, काटकोलन. अब ये क्यों मैं नाम दे रहा हूं कि अब इसमें आप देखिए कि जो हिस्टोरिकल एविडेंस वो क्या प्रूफ करता है. तो इन सारे साइट्स जिसका नाम मैंने लिया, भगवानपुरा, दाधेरी और काटकोलन का, इन सारे साइट से एक चीज कॉमनली पाया गया है, और क्या है वो मैं बताता हूं. इस साइट्स में later Harappan people have been found along with early Vedic people. Later Harappan people have been found along with the early Vedic people. So the material culture which has been excavated from these three sites are having sufficient evidence of the overlapping of the late Harappa with the early Vedic population. Therefore, indicating very clearly that the people had started living even together in some parts of so-called Harappan region. Fine. That is what actually we also come to know from these all sites. So see, these are the informations or evidences which proves the fact that there was some intermingling also between the two cultures together. Fine. And the most interesting story that goes on, that is in front of your screen only, that is the Bogojkoy inscription. Now see, this is not the only inscription that proves the fact that they were the outsiders. I give you the name of some more inscriptions, like Anatolia inscription. Anatolia. Let me share the green screen so that you can understand it in one go. Just a moment. So I was talking about that we have got ample of evidences now to prove the fact that the Aryans were the outsiders. All right, so we should not be carrying any emotion towards that, because an argument to say Aryans were the insiders is highly emotional on tinge rather on the fact it is based. So now you can see on the screen, I am sharing the screen with all of you, the green screen now. See, we have just talked about all these things. All right, we'll talk about this again once more, but let us first of all discover that who were these people Aryans, because that's a highly debatable topic in India. Actually, it is basically being debated in this country. All right, so let us discuss that first. We'll come to this issue once more. See, yes, see on your screen. So we have got the inscriptions starting from 2200 BC. पहला इंस्क्रिप्शन हमें मिलता है 2200 BCE का इराक से, ठीक है, और इसका डेटिंग जो है वो हम लोगों ने नहीं किया है, ये इंटरनेशनल डेटिंग है. So it is not done by R.S. Sharma or D.N. Jha or Romila Thapar or Dedi Kosambi. No, they have not done it. All right, it has been done by international agencies. See, this is an inscription of 2200 BC that has been found or discovered in Iraq. Second, in 1900 BC, we have also found another inscription from Anatolia. That is where Turkey. Fine. Third, we have got another inscription of Kassite that has been found from Iraq, dated of 1600 BCE. Fourth, we have found another inscription of Mitanni of 1400 BCE, found from Syria. Fifth, Bagoj Koi inscription, that's a very famous inscription. Bagoj Koi inscription has also been found from Turkey of 1400 BCE. Now, the point and why I'm discussing about all these things is, can you imagine in all these inscriptions, the name of the Vedic gods was similar the way you read in Rigveda. So, how is it possible that they were also the worshipper of Indra, Varuna, Mitra, the Satyas? Same Indra, Varuna, Mitra, and Satyas are elaborately mentioned in Rigveda. All right, elaborately mentioned in Rigveda. But the interesting point that I would also like to mention over here is that is quite also interesting for you also to think over it, because I keep thinking over these issues very, deeply. In fact, that is one of the most interesting topic for me. In fact, in terms of not only teaching but also in terms of reading it, because you need to also think over it that, of course, there are commonalities between the gods. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, we have to understand it, and this is what I can mention also. There's a factual evidence, so we can't deny it. That's a fact. All right. ऐसा नहीं कि किसी ने वहां प्लेस कर दिया और फिर कहा कि यहाँ पे मेरा मंदिर है और यही मेरा मंदिर बनेगा. So it's not like that. It's like that we have got the evidences to prove this particular fact. Yes, the names of the gods were similar to the Rigvedic literature, in fact. But the important point that I also need to think that if at all there were similar people who were there also in Iraq, Turkey, Syria, or let's say even in the case of Iran to that extent, because we have also discussed Iran. अभी उसके बारे में डिस्कस करेंगे, पहले इसको डिस्कस कर लेते हैं, तो ईरान पे भी आते हैं. तो अगर ये सब एक ही समान पीपल होंगे, या एक ही लोग होंगे, या एक ही क्लास के लोग होंगे, या एक ही कैसे लिंग्विस्टिक ग्रुप के लोग होंगे, all right, that is what we call it, the Aryans, then how was it possible that these people were knowing the art of writing, but the Aryans were not knowing the art of writing? Because who had placed these all inscriptions over there? If these inscriptions were written in 2200 BCE or so-called 1900 BCE, where dating has been done on the basis of carbon dating, carbon 14 dating, and other scientific tools used now in today's time to decipher the dating. So if the dating were done of 2200 to 900 BCE, so the people who wrote those inscriptions, they were knowing the art of writing. But why people who were in India, they were not knowing the art of writing? So that's a very interesting thing to think over it. Fine. So see, the idea is there is one possibility that I would always, pontificate, in fact, with all the evidences, all the concrete evidences also, and that is that definitely there may be some people which was a part of the so-called Aryan culture or Aryan tribe itself, who may not have been trained in the art of writing. Because art of writing again becomes a very specific art of learning, in fact. It is similarly to see in our own surrounding. How many people that you also know that they know art of writing? All right. Now they know about many things. They can tell you कि भाई 100 रुपए में 70 रुपए घटा दोगे या नहीं दोगे, कम दोगे तो 30 रुपए बचता है. They can tell you about all this mathematics. But if you ask them कि भाई लिख के दिखा, they will say कि भैया कहाँ लिखने आता है, मुझे लिखने आता तो मैं ठेला चलाता यहाँ पे, साइकिल चलाता यहाँ पे, रिक्शा चलाता यहाँ पे. They will say you this thing. Now similarly, you just try to relate the same story that is with the Aryans. So there must have been also the people there in this particular part of the land who were not trained in the art of writing. And let me tell you, when do you migrate? You migrate when you see that some superior power has come to, of course, grab the resources, and you have been left in lurch, or rather you have been converted into a slave, and you have been exploited by them. So you are becoming uncomfortable, or rather you are getting suffocated in that environment. So what do? You try to move from those areas. It is just like you can see in your own surrounding the so-called jamindars in the villages. If they start exploiting the poor people, how the poor people used to react? They used to move away from the village area completely. Okay, because they didn't have the ability to fight back, the power to fight back. So obviously they will move. Now exactly that must have also taken place in case of these Aryans who started migrating towards India. Fine. And therefore you see there is another very interesting similarity. Another very interesting similarity that we come to know from Jind Avesta. Jind Avesta of the Zoroastrians. All right. Now see, Jind Avesta, very important textbook, parallel to Rigveda, written in Iran, of Zoroastrians, basically people who follow Zoroastrian religion, then in Iran or Persia. So Jind Avesta equally mentions the names of the god like Indra, Varun. Not only that, but Jind Avesta also mentions about the names like Dahes and the Siyus, or the Hughes. Dahes and the Hughes. So it also mentions the name like Dahes and the Hughes. So Dahes and the Hughes. Now see, Jind Avesta, written in somewhere around 1500 BCE, now in Iranian, also called Persian language. Now this book or this textbook is also referring some common names like Indra, Varun, or Dahes, or the Hughes. Now Dahes or the Hughes have been identified as Dasas of Rigveda and the Siyus of Rigveda. Because in Rigveda, dasas and dasyus have been elaborately mentioned, repeatedly mentioned. Dasas and dasyus are repeatedly mentioned in the Rigvedic text. And the interesting fact about this mentioning about this so-called dasas and dasyus is that for dasyus, Rigveda has been highly critical. Rigveda has condemned dasyus from every angle. All right. So dasyus hatya has been frequently mentioned in Rigveda and used to be one of the prime duties of the Rigvedic gods. All right. So dasyu hatya has been very clearly mentioned, which is giving us impression that the Rigvedic Aryans were hostile to dasyus, but not to dasas. They were hostile to dasyus, but not to the dasas in similar way, in similar manner. All right. Because in Rigveda, what it mentions that is interesting also. See, Rigveda mentions that why it is important to keep dasyus away. It says that the dasyus were the black-skinned people. That's what actually Rigveda Haim says. They were the black-skinned people, malignant man is speaking a language that is complete alien to them, and they do not indulge into sacrificing or sacrifices. They are snub-nosed. They are snub-nosed black people, do not indulge in sacrifices, speak some alien language. That is what Rigveda says. For whom? For the dasyus. On the other hand, for dasas, they are slightly soft. They are slightly soft. Now, why they are soft? I tell you why they are soft. See, the Aryans, I told you also, they were always very smart people. All right, they have always been very smart people right from the beginning. See, they came to India, or they came to India again in waves. They didn't come in, let's say, in one way or in one group at one point of time. They kept on coming in different waves. Let's say in one year they came in, let's say, 100. Another year they came in 200. Another year they came in, let's say, 300. So it kept on coming to India in waves, in fact. All right, so there has been regular migration, in fact. It's not like कि एक साल आए और सब आके बैठ गए यहाँ पे. It's not like that. 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 करके वो आते गए. Fine. So now the point is, the people who came first in India from the area of Iran or area of West Asia, they were called as dasas. They were called as dasas. And dasyus were probably the local inhabitants of India. तो पहला इन्वेजन इंडिया में हुआ आर्यंस का ही, जो कि बहुत सारे लोग इसको मानते नहीं है, इस थ्योरी को. ठीक है, लेकिन फैक्ट तो यही है. भले माने ना माने, लेकिन फैक्ट तो यही है. Alright, so now see, you see that these people started coming in waves. So पहला जो वेव आया, वो आया तकरीबन 1800-1700 BC के आसपास ही वो आ चुके थे इंडिया में. ठीक है, वो आ चुके थे और आ चुके नहीं थे, इनफैक्ट यहाँ पे वो इंटरमिंगल कर चुके थे किसके साथ? लोकल पीपल के साथ. फाइन. Now see, why I'm telling to all of you all these things. Reason being, in Rigveda itself it is mentioned that there were some powerful kings from the Aryan side. One of the kings from the Aryan side mentioned in Rigveda was Devodas. Devodas. अब देवोदास की चर्चा की हुई है आर्यन के पहले टेक्स्ट बुक ऋग्वेदा के टेक्स्ट में. और ये क्या कहता है कि देवोदास नाम का एक शासक था, एक किंग था, he was a very powerful king, fine, and this person Devodas, he belonged to a particular clan that is named Bharat clan, जिसके नाम के पीछे भारत नाम पड़ा इंडिया का, Bharat clan. So he was of Bharat clan and this clan was of Aryans. Fine. And Devodas was a king of this clan. Now this Devodas, he happened to defeat another powerful ruler and his name was Sambara. Sambara. ठीक है, नाम से लग रहा है कि ये ट्राइबल टाइप का आदमी होगा, कोई होगा, है ना? तो सांबरा कौन था? तो ट्राइबल ही था ये. He was a non-Aryan. So Sambara was non-Aryan king. He was a non-Aryan chieftain. Fine. And Sambara was the Dasyu. Now you see here. Sambara was the chief of Dasyus. So he was chief of Dasyus who fought with Devodas. Fine. So Devodas became successful because he invoked God Indra. So God Indra supported him and he was able to defeat him. अब ये मेंशन कहाँ है? ये मेंशन ऋग्वेदा में. अब सवाल ये होता है कि ये दास जो है वर्ड, ये दास का टाइटल क्यों लगाया इसने? ये था कौन? अगर वो आर्यन था तो दास लगाने की जरूरत क्या थी? कुछ और लगाता वो. से और सारे नाम थे आर्यन के, वशिष्ठ नाम थे, बृहस्पति नाम थे, सारे बड़े बड़े वहां उस समय के मुनि थे, ऋषि मुनि थे. ठीक है, तो बृहस्पति, वशिष्ठ, वाल्मीकि वगैरह ऐसा नाम लेते वो, यही नाम था आर्यंस का. ये देवोदास कौन था? तो और था तो था, इनको वो आर्यंस भी कह रहे थे और फिर भी ये दास एज ए सरनेम लगा रखा था और अपने ही वैदिक टेक्स्ट में ये इनके तरफ और जो दासस कम्युनिटी थे उनके तरफ ये सॉफ्ट से थोड़े बस दस्युस को देखना नहीं चाहते थे. Now it proves the fact that some of the Aryans migrated before the migration of real Aryans of Vedic period. Or I would say the Rigvedic Aryans. Perfect word for them is Rigvedic Aryans. So these Rigvedic Aryans, they found that already their ancestors, they had already entered into Indian territory, and not only entered, but they have already commanded some area, controlled some area. All right. So they are controlling some area, or rather they're having some groups, and on those groups they were having some, you can say, dominance. So these people, the Rigvedic Aryans, recognize them as the king also initially. All right. So they recognized them as king also, and they also brought them into the Aryan fold. ठीक है. सो देवोदास का एक एग्जाम्पल है आपके पास. इसके ऐसे और भी दर्जनों एग्जाम्पल है ऋग्वेदा के अंदर. दूसरा एग्जाम्पल देता हूं आपको. सेकेंड एग्जाम्पल इज अनदर वेरी फेमस बैटल ऑफ 10 किंग्स. Now, very famous battle of 10 kings is another very famous story of Rigveda. Battle of 10 kings. Fine. So this battle of 10 kings is mentioned in Rigveda that it was fought on the river bank of Parushni. On the river bank of Parushni. Parushni has been identified as the river Ravi. All right. So on the bank of river Parushni, a battle of 10 kings were fought. And the interesting fact about this battle was another king named Sudas. फिर ये आ गया दास. Sudas. फिर देखिए दास इसमें भी लगा हुआ है. So another king, Sudas, he along with the confederacy of some more Aryans together, he led a battle and he also won against the other Aryan group, and they were the Purus. So Sudas fought another battle with Purus, and he was able to defeat the Purus also. Sudas was also from Bharat clan. He was also from Bharat clan. Probably he may have been either the relative or son of Devodas. So Sudas also became the ruler or the king, and he had to fight with Puru. And after defeating Puru, this Bharat clan adopted Purus into their own clan, and they became Kurus. So Bharat and Puru got united and they formed Kurus. Alright, Kurus. And then Kurus and Panchal were the two Aryan groups. Panchal. Two Aryan groups which used to control the area of Upper Ganga Valley in the ऋग्वेदिक पीरियड. अब आप देखिए कि ऋग्वेदिक पीरियड के एंड के तरफ अब हम जा रहे हैं, तो हमारे पास एक नया इंफॉर्मेशन ये भी मिलता है कि कुछ ऐसे भी आर्यन से जो खुद में भी लड़ाई करते थे, क्योंकि ये लोग मेनली ट्राइबल्स ही थे, ठीक है. और इस समय जब ये इंडिया में आए तो इनके पास सबसे बड़ा वेल्थ होता था, इनके पास कैटल, cow. So cow happened to be the biggest wealth and the most important wealth of these Aryans. So the politics of cow in India, it is actually the gift of the Aryans only. Let me tell you one thing, another very important fact. Fine. Because this cow issue was also another factor for me to score very poor marks in my second interview. 138 out of 300 was given to me by K.S. Chalam. All right. So I should not say, but let me tell you one thing, that K.S. Chalam was a person from scheduled caste. All right. And he became professor, and he was having a research there in scheduled caste promotion only in India. So when he interviewed me, he first of all asked me he wanted to know exactly my caste. Let me tell you one thing very clearly. But since, of course, they can't ask you caste directly, they can ask you some other things through that they can come to know about your caste. So, however, they came to know, okay, I am Sinha and I am general candidate. So probably he wanted to know exactly my caste. So he asked me certain questions, which I could figure out later on. That why did he ask me all those questions? So he asked me certain questions about Bihar and about Bihar politics on the basis of caste and all those things initially. So when he came out with some conclusion that I belong to certain caste, then he asked me a particular question which was really very interesting. He asked me, okay, tell me one thing about cow killing and eating of cow meat in the ancient time. What is the opinion regarding that? All right. So I got to know that okay, he wants to check that particular information, and how do I opine, or how do I keep an opinion regarding that. So I took some time because it was really a very I would say a controversial question. All right. So I took some time. I thought to frame a better answer than to reply, rather to give a reply immediately. So when I started thinking, he got to know that I will frame a very let's say balanced answer, and perhaps I will not give the answer what he was looking for. All right. So he immediately changed the question drastically. He said, okay, fine, leave it. You just tell me one thing. What is the politics regarding the holy cow in India? So I simply said that this is something that has been pulled up as a part of the evolution of Indian history. The cow has become a sort of a religious figure in India. So he said, no, you don't tell me the standard process of evolution of the cow history in India. You tell me that whether holy cow was a concept there in India, or whether it is still existing in India or not, whether Hindus eat the beef or not. You tell me about this. So I said that, sir, we have the historical evidences which proves that yes, people out there, whether Hindu or not, I don't know about it, but yes, people were initially they were also feeding upon the cow meat, because cow at that particular point of time was not a religious animal. In fact, it was simply an animal. And even in Rigveda, it is mentioned that of course, the cow which was not milching, even that could be also offered as a meal, because a word called Goghana is mentioned there in Rigveda. Goghana. Goghana means cow eater or cow meat eater, in fact. All right. So obviously, I wanted to say this. Then he said, okay, fine, leave it. You just tell me one thing. What's the myth about holy cow? So I said, holy cow is something that has been evolved out of the entire religious process, or you can say process of India's evolution of religion in this country. So he said, no, don't give me the standard opinion. You just tell me about holy cow and the myth of holy cow. So I started thinking of that. Then again, he shifted the question. He said me, okay, have you read this holy cow? I said, no, I have not read it. Now, it is all because he knew that I was a student of D.N. Jha. So D.N. Jha was my teacher. All right. So obviously, he wanted me to, I mean, of course, give the opinion of D.N. Jha regarding the holy cow. However, I have not gone through the book. I mean, D.N. Jha sir has written a book on holy cow. तो मैंने उसको पढ़ा नहीं था, मैंने बाद में उसको देखा क्या है उसके, ठीक है, तो मैंने साहब से कहा कि आई हैव नॉट read that book. Then he said, okay, fine, leave this question, ask some other question. So he transferred the question to someone else. Fine. So see, I mean, that is the kind of mentality that is also there in the UPSC board. So we can't say that these people also there in UPSC, they are completely neutral, having no element of biasness, having no element of any prejudices. It's all about bakwas. Let me tell you one thing. The the point is that till the time human being will be involved in the process of interview, there will always be an element of biasness. Always be. So someone who says that no, interview in UPSC is highly unbiased, so it is always a fake statement. The moment a human involvement is there, how can they be unbiased? A human being will be definitely influenced by some of the other ideology, some of the other, you can say, person, some of the other, you can say, system. So obviously, if you give them the answers on the basis of their ideology, then obviously you're going to be rewarded with handsome marks in interview. But if you are not proving yourself on their ideology, then obviously you're not going to be rewarded on that particular point. Since I could not say very clearly to him that yes, Hindus were eating cow meat, I was not mentioning this word very clearly, so he shifted the question very smartly, because he wanted to listen this word from my side. Because however, I could have said, but I deliberately didn't say this. I thought it's a very highly controversial question. Why should I take this particular name that Hindus were the cow eaters? All right. So I didn't say. I simply said it's a part of the process of evolution, and anyone. I mean, it's not a Hindu or XYZ. Whosoever was there in ancient time, they had to feed upon cow because it was actually a part of the animal meat, and meat eating was also a part of the exercise even in the ancient time. All right. This is how the human has evolved. Agriculture came quite late. It's very obvious to know about it. So how did they survive when agriculture was not practiced? So definitely people used to eat the meat of cow or XYZ animal, but that particular point of time it was only animal. It became a sort of a religious symbol quite later point of time, I would say, especially by the time of Gupta period, I would say in that particular manner. So I didn't say this particular word deliberately, and he perhaps understood it. He perhaps understood that this guy is smart. He will not say this particular fact. He will say all this particular evolution and development of the human civilization, but he will not utter this word that Hindus were the cow eaters. So he smartly shifted the question. All right, and that time only I got to know that okay, fine, he will not be giving me good marks. And I was sure about him. He gave me only 138 marks, despite the fact that the rest of the questions were smartly answered. All right. So that is how even ideology also matters in UPSC interview. All right. So I should have carried this notion that when I'm going for the interview, that too in the Congress regime, where the communists are going to be the members there in the UPSC for sure reasons. So I should have carried this notion that yes, I should actually bang upon the Hindus, bang upon the so-called dominant class there in India, so-called forward class in India, I should always criticize them. And if I would have done it, I would have been rewarded in that particular manner. Because my very good friend, my very good friend who is now into IRS, he was interviewed the same board. I received 138, he got 238. Highest marks in that year in interview. So he was only got a call on the passing mark for interview. I was having 30 marks above than him in my mains. But interview screwed him up completely to me, in fact. All right. So see, what was the point that I was making to you? He belonged to the so-called, let's say, reserve caste. All right. So obviously he banged upon that. All right. The moment he was asked the same question, almost same line of question, he was critical to the forward caste. He was critical to the so-called Hindu domination caste system in India, and he was rewarded for that. All right, he got 238 marks by the same person in the same interview panel. He got 238 marks. Okay, now that is how difference is there also in interview. So when we used to go for interview, of course, after that also I got another chance to go for interview. And in every interview, earlier we used to ask to give our opinion. The UPSC used to give us a form to fill up there inside the hall. That is the Dharpur House Hall. So we were given a form to fill up that form before our interview. And in that particular form, they used to ask us our opinion or suggestions in that way, how to bring reform in UPSC pattern of examination. I always remember I used to give only one recommendation: change this pattern of conducting interview. Because I knew this is something which is highly biased system. But till the time when there's no system of biasness, I used to qualify every level. But once there was a system of biasness, I used to be always penalized for that particular aspect. And I was sure about it. This is something which is very dangerous, because in this particular process, what you are trying to do, you are trying to select the people only on the basis of common ideology. And that is dangerous. That is absolutely dangerous, in fact. So this is how even in UPSC these things happen. Fine. And you have to remember about all these things. So when you get a chance for interview, you should keep a notion or sort of a notion beforehand that which all members are going to interview you. All right. Which I did in my last interview. I, in fact, studied the profile of all the members. Let me tell you. In my final interview of 2010, what I did, I took the printout of the profile of every chairman or every person, every board members or every members of UPSC. I studied them very minutely. Try to simply figure out that what kind of person he or she was in her past or his past. What all things he did in the past. Then only I came to know about KS Chala. I said कि पहले पढ़ लेते तो शायद I could have depended on it. I could have satisfied his urges, which I could not. So of course it played a significant role in my third interview where I scored relatively better. All right, but of course that is what you also need to do. In fact, you also have to understand the psyche of other person to whom you are going to be interviewed, in fact, because that always play a very instrumental role in matching up their expectation with your opinion and your answers in that particular manner. Fine, that is equally very important for you. So coming back to this issue only, this holy cow issue was there. All right, so now see, they were having the most important wealth, that is cow, and for the cow only they were fighting against each other. And according to Rigveda, these Dasyus were the cow lifters. Panis were the cow lifters. Another very important community there in Rigveda. Panis. So Rigveda was critical to Dasyus and Panis because of one common reason, and that was cow lifting. ये लोग काउ चुरा के लेके जाते थे, लेके भाग जाते थे, तो काउ चोरी करते थे, इसी कारण ये इनके दुश्मन थे, तो इनको खूब गाली देते थे, कहते थे कि जहां देखो मार दो इसको, काउ चोर सब है, ठीक है. So that's what actually the language that has been used in Rigveda. Interesting one, in fact, in that way. So Panis were the merchants. Panis were the merchants, probably identified with the merchants of Harappa also. These Dasyus have been identified also the local inhabitants like Harappa. All right. There was interesting fact about Harappa I told you already. We have got n number of evidences of every animal, not of cow, but not of cow. हमारे पास सारे एविडेंसेस है कि बुल है, एलिफेंट है, हॉर्स हॉर्स है, नहीं है, मतलब आप समझिए कि आप भैंस है और आप टाइगर है, राइनोसेरस है, सब कुछ है, लेकिन काऊ नहीं है। ठीक है, तो अब क्यों नहीं है ये हड़प्पा वाले बता पाएंगे, लेकिन कहने का मतलब ये है कि दिस इज समथिंग विच इज वेरी 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 इंटरेस्टिंग अबाउट इंडियन हिस्ट्री, दैट काऊ बिकेम सो इंपॉर्टेंट इन ऋग्वेदा or in the Vedic era, that these people were not liked by the Vedic people because of only one common reason, and that was they were the cow lifters. All right. So this is how you see the so-called Vedic people. They happen to be the people from outside, and they started settling down in India by the time of 1500 BCE, who were the original Rigvedic Aryans, in fact. Now these Rigvedic Aryans, they were the people who used to speak a language that is called Sanskrit. Fine. So there were Sanskrit speakers, and because of the Sanskrit only, they used to signify themselves as an in-group. An in-group, and those who could not understand and speak Sanskrit, they were the out-groups. They were the out-groups. So here, they were critical to the Dasas, in fact, Dasyus also, and probably the Dasas were able to comprehend but may not be able to speak. So therefore, for Dasas, they were slightly soft, but Dasyus neither was able to comprehend it, not even able to speak it out. So hence they were critical to them. All right. See on your screen. Now in this screen, it is really clearly I'm mentioning over here that they started migrating from different point of time. And of course, from here, when they migrated also towards India. And by 1500 BCE, they became the Rigvedic Aryans, or they were called as Rigvedic Aryans. So the people who spoke about the Rigvedic hymns, they were Rigvedic Aryans. Fine. So this is how Rigveda started, or Vedic period started in India. Fine. When they came to India, they settled down in a particular geography that is called as Sapta Sandhav area. Sapta Sandhav. Sapta Sandhav area. All right. So what is Sapta Sandhav area? This is basically the area nearby Indus. Sandhav means Sindhu River. So they came down to the area of Sapta Sandhav, which is Indus and its tributaries. And initially they settled down in the area of today's Pakistan, East Afghanistan, Punjab, and Western UP. So in the early Vedic phase, they settled down in these zones, in these particular pockets of India. Fine. The political system of Rigveda people, it was simply classified as a monarchical form of government. Monarchy was there, but these monarchs were not so powerful because a sense of a permanent territory did not emerge in the Rigvedic period. Permanent territory मतलब क्या है कि ये मोबाइल थे, एक ट्राइबल ग्रुप्स में सब थे, ठीक है। जैसे कि आपने कभी देखा हो बंजारा लोगों को, बंजारा लोग कैसे रहते हैं, एक साथ सारे ग्रुप में रहते हैं, ठीक है। कुछ दिन रह लिए एक जगह पे 2-4 महीने, फिर 4-5 महीने कहीं और रह लिए, 5-6 महीने कहीं और चले गए, ऐसे रहते हैं बंजारा। और पूरा सिस्टम वो लेके चलते हैं, पूरा फैमिली सारा सामान वगैरह जो भी है। Exactly same way, these people were also living. Therefore, I told you the area right from Afghanistan till UP. I mean, it's a big area. Till Western UP I have talked about. So अफगानिस्तान से लेके वेस्टर्न यूपी तक इनका स्प्रेड था. तो कभी ये पाकिस्तान के साथ रहते होंगे, पाकिस्तान जो आज पाकिस्तान है उसमें रहते होंगे, कभी वहां से मूव करके ये लेट से बॉर्डर पे आते होंगे पंजाब में, कभी हरियाणा में, हरियाणा से घुसते कभी वेस्ट यूपी में आते होंगे. तो ऐसे ये मोबाइल थे, मूव करते थे. मैं बात कर रहा हूँ अर्ली वैदिक पीरियड की बात. तो पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम वाज बेस्ड अपॉन द सो कॉल्ड ट्राइबल lineage society. It was tribal lineage society, lineage. And therefore, there was a tribal chieftain in the Rigveda period, Rigvedic period. And Indra, interesting fact, Indra as a god, it has been revered, or it has been, you can say, worshipped in the Rigveda, happened to be also a great warrior of Rigvedic period. So indirectly, it is understood that Indra must have been the chieftain of these Rigvedic Aryans. And this Indra was equally powerful, not only in warfare, but also in remembering the rich mantras or the hymns very profoundly, very soundly. So therefore, the other people of this chieftain, they used to worship him like a god. Because Indra has been referred as Purandar in Rigveda. Purandar in Rigveda, indicating that he was the most powerful chieftain god who used to also destroy the fortified areas. Purandar means the destroyer of fortified or forts. So the destroyer of forts were called as Purandar. So the point is, what kind of forts they used to destroy? All right, who were living inside the fort? Of course, the Harappans we are talking about. Almost all the sites of Harappa have been fortified. All right, except Chanhudaro, all the sites have been formed into fortified area. I went to Rakhigadi and even Banawali of Haryana. I found all the sites were fortified. All right. So in that way, these fortified areas were destroyed by who? By Indra. So Indra perhaps may have also started destroying these all forts, which may have been of Harappa, and then overtaking the area of these Harappan people only, or rather forcing them to flee or to become a slave of these particular people. तो उनका दो ही ऑप्शन है, या तो स्लेव बन जाते हैं, जो बने disuse are called as, all right, या वो भागते यहाँ से और भाग के कहीं और जाते हैं. तो ऐसा भी हुआ इंडिया में. So you can see when the force started coming from northwestern side, many of these people started moving towards eastern part of India and also southern part of India. For example, around 1000 BCE, we also got the evidences of the megalithic culture in South India. And these megalithic people were having some commonalities of Harappa. Fine, some commonalities of Harappan people as well. So probably these megalithic people of South India may have been the original Harappans also. All right. So see, I mean, what I am saying to you, you need to think about all these things in the proper perspective without having any emotional attachment to any particular ideology. I mean, you need to understand why there is a feeling of so-called Dravidians and so-called Aryans in India, even in current time. It's not about India, even in Sri Lanka. You read my book on Indo-Sri Lanka, I have written it very clearly that even in Sri Lanka, the root cause of the problem of LTTE was the discrimination that was given to the so-called Dravidians there in Sri Lanka. The Tamil Dravidians in Sri Lanka were the so-called Aryans in Sri Lanka. So it was basically the Aryan versus Dravidian that led to the emergence of a person called Prabhakaran and forming the LTTE. All right. So exactly the same way you have to also understand from the Indian history perspective. Fine. So why do we have a differences between the so-called racial outlook from North India and South India? Of course, this must have been a cause. Whether you accept it or don't accept it, but that is exactly the cause. Had we been so uniform, so common, we would have looked like common people. But it's not like that. We have different races available in this country. We have Alpines, we have Mongolites, we have Mediterraneans. Everything is available in this country. So that's the reason why you need to understand the history of India has been so vast, so rich, so big that these all developments took place in thousands of years. And that is precisely, I always say, that why we are divided on the lines of caste, why we are divided on the lines of the religion, why we are divided on the lines of even so-called races. It is all due to the way India has been carved out. All right, the way India has been carved out. Fine. So India is always a land of everyone. That's the reason why I always keep saying it's not a land of one particular community, because any community can't claim this territory belongs to them for permanent reasons. All right. So coming back to this issue, the point was I was saying before all of you that they came to settle down in some Sandhav area and then started migrating towards also the Ganga region. All right, towards the western UP and even UP region gradually. Because by the time of later Vedic period, we see the Aryans had started expanding. Rather, they expanded, I would say, to entire UP, came under the influence of the Aryans, and even the north part of Bihar came under the influence of Aryans. Now, why? Because see, in Satpat Brahman, very interesting textbook, Satpat Brahman. Now, Satpat Brahman mentions about the expansion of Aryans in the eastern part of India till the area of North Bihar, how a king named Videha विदेहा की ही बेटी थी सीता, वैदेही कहते हैं सीता को. So king named Videha, he carried Agni, god Agni, on his shoulder, and he started burning the forest, burning the forest and establishing the Aryan culture till the part of river Sadanira. River Sadanira is today's modern Gandak. Modern Gandak. Gandak river that flows in Bihar. So river Sadanira. So till that river Sadanira, Aryans expanded by the time of later Vedic period itself. Fine. So the area of Sita Madhi, that is understood to be the place of the birthplace of goddess Sita in Bihar, that was the area of King Videha. Fine, that was the area of King Videha, in fact. And there's a great mythology regarding all these particular stories. So I'm not going to get into that, in fact. So in that area, you see expansion of Aryans took place. So you see Aryans by the time of later Vedic period, they expanded towards till North Bihar. Not beyond that, not even below that. Therefore, there's a common practice even in Bihar today. Let me tell you one more practice, that is social custom in Bihar. A social custom there in Bihar, that Orthodox Brahman of Bihar, who mainly live in the northern part of Bihar, they always say that they should not be cremated in any condition in the southern part of Bihar. That is still practiced in Bihar. That is still practiced. The people there in Mithilanchal, people there in, let's say, the area of the entire Mithilanchal, this is the entire Mithilanchal block, in fact, Mithilanchal area I'm talking about. They still have a practice that they don't want to get cremated after the death in southern part of Bihar. Why? Because it was not Aryanized. It was not Aryanized. ये अभी भी वहाँ के कल्चर में है. मैं आपको कल्चर से कुछ बात बता रहा हूँ जो कि कल्चर से भी हम हिस्ट्री इंटरप्रेट कर सकते हैं. So that is a part of the culture of Bihar, in fact. Fine. So this is what actually we come to know about the Aryans in that manner. So we see that how Aryans expanded and from where the Aryans came. Fine. Let me share the PPT with all of you to understand the other aspects of this entire Vedic culture that is there: political aspect, economic aspect, social aspect. See, politically, we have just told you that, of course, initially they were living in the tribal sort of system. So therefore, they were having tribal chieftain. But by later Vedic period, they started emerging as a, you can say, permanent settlers also. See, Jindal Vesta, we have already talked about this issue. So Rigvedic geography, we have already talked about, that they were knowing about various rivers. All right, why do we say that they were also knowing about the eastern part of Afghanistan? Because they have talked about the Kuba or Kabul region. In the Vedic text, Kuba is mentioned. So it was also part of the Indian territory in that particular point, in that particular way, Indian territory or the Aryan territory at that particular point of time. Fine. Then the hymns of Rigveda, already we have discussed about it. Fine. Sudas and all those battle of 10 kings. So society, I just told you, in fact, they see society in Rigvedic time had not been classified the way we know today. It is only in the last textbook. There are 10 textbooks of Rigveda. ठीक है? Rigveda में 10 मंडल है. Mandal means the chapters. So there are 10 mandalas of Rigveda, and in the 10th mandala that was said to be added towards the end of Rigveda and the beginning of later Vedic period. So it was added quite late in the Rigvedic texts, that is 10th mandala. And the 10th mandala only there's a hymn called Purush Shukta hymn. Purush Shukta hymn. And this Purush Shukta hymn is the information, it is the base of the emergence of four Varna system. Four Varna system in India. Four Varna system where we see the emergence of the four classes of people in India, that's Brahmans, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Sudras. So emergence of Brahman, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Sudras is for the first time mentioned in the 10th mandala of Rigveda. That is called as Purush Shukta. So Varna order emerged in the 10th mandala of Rigveda. So by the time of later Vedic period, society got divided into four Varnas clearly. But overall, in the Rigveda, society is said to be more or less egalitarian. But of course, it was not so egalitarian the way we understand the meaning of egalitarian today. Egalitarian in the context of that the class was divided on the basis of profession. There was a warrior class, fist class, common people all together in Rigveda time. But it was equally a patriarchal society, there's no doubt about it. A patriarchal society, why? Because here we see in Rigveda, it is clearly mentioned also about the position of women and how they should be treated in the society. So, of course, women position was better than the later Vedic phase, there's no doubt about it. But they were not their decision makers even in the Rigvedic society as well. Fine. So we see society started dividing on the four Varna system. That is how society of Rigveda is known for. As far as political system was concerned, they were mainly a tribal people. They were mobile, and the hereditary chief was called as Rajan. They were called as Rajan in the Rigvedic time. Fine. And the main duty of this Rajan was to protect their tribes. Protect their tribes, and the tribes have been referred frequently in Rigveda as Jana. Jana has been frequently referred in Rigveda, which has been understood to be tribes. So the chief was supposed to perform a task to protect the tribes or the Janas. So he was basically a tribal chief, chief of the Janas only. And these Janas were mobile. That's what actually was the political system there in the Vedic, early Vedic period, in fact. Interesting fact about the Vedic period was that they were also having some assemblies. Assemblies were important in the Vedic period also. And these assemblies was like Sabha, Samiti, Vidhat, and Gan. Sabha, Samiti, Vidhat, and Gan. So see here on the screen, Sabha, Samiti, Vidhat, and Gan. They are mentioned in the Rig Veda. Sabha was the assembly of the elders. Samiti was an assembly of the common people. All right. And here in the Samiti, or rather Samiti only, this was a particular assembly of the common people who used to also elect the Rajan. So who would be the chief inside their own tribal group? It was decided in Samiti. Fine. So more or less society, or rather the political system, was also based upon the election of the chief to that with the consensus of all the members. Fine. And these particular sabha, in fact, sabha was that particular organization where women used to also participate. So women were allowed to participate in sabhas and also in Vidhat, because Vidhat was another assembly, was called as a tribal assembly. Vidhat was a tribal assembly. All right. And this tribal assembly used to organize the religious and military functions. Religious and military functions. So probably for religious functions, women were allowed to attend Vidhat. All right. And as you know that rituals became a very important part of the society of Vedic people. Fine. So obviously, for that also women were supposed to perform certain rituals in this Sabha and Vidhat. Fine. Interesting fact about that, the king used to always seek the support of both Samiti and Sabha for his all major decisions. Fine. That is how the king used to survive, and the most important source for the survival of king was the the wealth that they used to grab after victory in any war. So war booty was their major wealth, which the king used to distribute among all the members of the tribe after victory over some other tribal groups. And even though king used to receive Bali, 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 that is voluntary contribution by the other tribal families to the king or to the Rajan. Fine. The Battle of 10 Kings is one of that examples which you've just talked about, in fact. Fine. So we already explained about the Battle of 10 Kings story. Economy of Rigveda was very at rudimentary level. Now they knew about, of course, agriculture, because in Rigveda the words like Kshetra, Krishi, which are mentioned in Rigveda, all right. In Rigveda, there's also mentioned about the word called Yavam or Yava. Yava has been identified as barley. Fine. Godhuma, that is wheat. All right. Godhuma, that is wheat. So Yava and wheat were, barley and wheat were the prime, you can say, product that they used to produce. And see, I mean, this is something which is very interesting to know. That barley is still so good for your health, so nourishing for your health, that very few people know about the importance of barley. Barley used to be a staple diet in India till I would say 1970s, till Green Revolution actually overshadowed all these products from India. All right. See, barley was so important, rather it has so you can say enriching, nourishing you can say factors, that even let's say a weak child or a weak you can say person, or even the ill person can be given barley. It is highly nourishing and very easy digestible. Fine. So even the weak or the ill person are fed with barley, even in India today, in our remote areas, in fact. But in urban culture, barley has almost gone out of the plate of the urban population. Fine. That is barley. So say barley and goduma used to be, wheat used to be very important, you can say, their production. Apart from that, there were also people who were knowing about cattle as a wealth. I told you already that they used to only worship for cattle. They used to worship for male child also. Alright, so cattle and male child used to be always the major theme of their worshipping. So that's actually another factor to recount with or to understand with. Fine. Then their religion, of course, I just told you that they used to practice, polytheistic naturalism. In fact, almost every natural element was signified as an, uh, you can say, anthropomorphic, or they were always converted into the male, or you can say the human form of gods. So every natural item was transformed into the human form of god. Like let's say Surya. So Surya is basically the sun god. All right. So Surya was also worshipped by them. Fine. Similarly, let's say Prithvi. Let's say Indra. All right. Let's say even Soma. So these are the plants. They also worshipped as a god. Varun, god of water, also worshipped as a god. So see, these all natural items were worshipped as a god at a point of time in Vedic religion. And the most important ritual was to sacrifice animal. That was the most important ritual of Rigvedic time. See, this is interesting story of later Vedic phase. In fact, that is a particular, you can say, beginning later Vedic phase, which is indicative of the writings of, you can say, the Mahabharata. In fact, all right. So from the story of Mahabharata only, which is said to have been written somewhere around later Vedic time only. All right. In fact, the story of Mahabharata was somewhere around later Vedic time only. So it is from that particular story only. That is about the story of three-legged cow of Dharmaraj from Treta Yuga. Fine. So it is a story of Yudhishthir. Fine. Yudhishthir from Mahabharata, in fact, the eldest of the five Pandav brothers of Mahabharata. So that is how this particular story goes on. So the idea is that in this story you don't have to learn much, learn lot in fact. But you remember that it is something in the context of the ethical or the moral story that was being communicated also to the people out there in later Vedic period, in fact. So in later Vedic period, we see the emergence of some philosophical, ethical, moral guidelines to govern the society. So indirectly, it is indicative of that some sort of problems started happening or taking place in the society of later Vedic phase itself, like corruption, like conspiracy, like, of course, stealing. This all happened, and this is a complete story which is mentioned in the Mahabharata itself. The way you see Ramayana is full of the idealism. Mahabharata is full of the corrupt practices that had started happening or taking place in the human society. Fine. So this is something very interesting for all of you. I'll share this particular slide for to all of you. You can read it out later on. See, later Vedic period is basically started from 1000 BC to 700 BC. Fine. And the major source of later Vedic phase for all of us is primarily the Yajurved, Samved, and Atharvaved. All right. And all these Vedas are having some of the other significance, which I haven't talked about. You might also be asked a question in your prelims that what was the significance of Atharvaved or Yajurved. one thing you have to always remember that Atharvaved is important for all of you. Why? Because from Atharvaved only, Ayurveda has emerged. Ayurveda. Alright. Ayurveda has emerged. The priest who used to recite Atharvaveda was called as Ritvij. 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 The priest who used to recite Atharvaveda was called as Ritvij. Ritvij. Alright, and it was full of rituals, magical charms. That is what Atharvaved was known for. Samved was recited by Udagatri. 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 And Samved was full of songs. Samved was full of songs. Yajurved was recited by Adhvaryu. Adhvaryu. Adhvar. V for victory. Varyu. Adhvaryu. Adhvaryu. It was the list of the hymns performed in the form of rituals. And Rigveda was recited by a priest named Hotri. Rigveda was recited by a priest named Hotri. 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 All right. So this is how the Vedic sources or Vedic texts were recited, find by these all particular scholars. One more information for all of you for Rigveda, which you have to always remember. The third mandala of Rigveda was written by Vishwamitra. Third mandala of Rigveda was written by Vishwamitra. And why I'm sharing this particular information, because of the reason that Gayatri mantra that we all know today, we all recite also, or Gayatri mantra that is recited at least in Orthodox Hindu family for sure reasons. So in this Gayatri mantra, it has been derived from, it actually has the origin from the third mandala of Rigveda, which were written by Vishwamitra. So Gayatri mantra was written by Vishwamitra. That is the third mandala of Rigveda. Fine. And the point I was about to raise here, that women were denied to recite Gayatri mantra. So here you can understand that discrimination started happening very clearly against women also. So society was not only against the so-called Sudras or certain extent the Vaishyas, but also against the women. So women were equally discriminated the way even Sudras or the Vaishyas were discriminated in the Indian society right from the beginning. So Gayatri Mantra was also not of course, the privilege for the women there in society of Rigveda. So Rigveda written both in fact. So in this manner, you can see this social division started taking shape concretely in the later Vedic time itself. Fine. So in later Vedic phase, you see the political development started taking shape in the form of that the monarchy got established very concretely. Monarchy. So monarchical form of government got established very deeply, and not only that, but here the monarch became quite powerful. Monarch became quite powerful, and here the monarch acquired not only a permanent land to rule over, permanent land to rule over, rather, rather the importance of Sabha and Samiti, importance of Sabha and Samiti were removed, they were replaced. तो सभा समिति यहाँ पे खत्म हो चुका था इसका इंपॉर्टेंस, और किंग को अब कहा जाता था ऋग्वेदिक लेटर वैदिक टाइम में सम्राट, नॉट राजन. So Rajan was the name in the early Vedic time for the king. Samrat was the name for the king in the later Vedic time. And when you use a word called Samrat, it always indicates a king having imperial ambition, ambition of expansionism. All right, so you are not only Rajan, rather you want to now also expand your areas. Therefore, the importance of the sacrifices like Vajpayee, Rajasuya, Aswamegh, now these all sacrifices or these all rituals increased tremendously in the towards the beginning of later Vedic time itself. Though even in Ramayana, Aswamegh Yagg has been shown. It was the Aswamegh Yagg only which Lord Rama was conducting. And of course, the horse of Ayodhya was caught by his two children, Love and Kush. So now you can see, I mean, this is what actually you also got to know, or rather we all got to know from Ramayana itself. So these sacrifices, because what was done in Aswamedh, let me tell you what was done in Aswamedh. Aswamedh नाम से समझ में आ जाएगा, अश्व को मारना. Meg means you have to kill the horse. So Aswamedh was a sort of a ritual in which horse was sacrificed. The royal horse was about to roam around in the area until the area where he will roam around along with a bunch of, you can say, armed forces to support that particular horse. And all those areas where they will roam around, the people out there will have to accept the suzerainty of the lord or suzerainty of the person who has dispatched the horse along with the small bunch of forces. And after the horse coming back to the original territory, it had to be sacrificed in a very, you can say, big fanfare affair. I mean, you can understand thousands of cattle were killed along with the royal horse. Thousands, not one or two. Thousands of cattle were killed along with the royal horse. That was a practice in the ritual. Fine. And of course, these particular horses were killed, the cattle were killed, they were distributed as a food item. Among everyone, especially among the Brahmanas, in fact. So that was the practice. So see, this is how this practice will start getting so much of importance in the lifestyle of the human being at that particular point of time, that Lord Buddha will have to emerge on the earth. Interesting history India का. अगर ये नहीं होता रिचुअल्स इतना तगड़ा, इतना खतरनाक टाइप का, तो शायद बुद्धा का जन्म भी नहीं होता, या बुद्धा आते भी नहीं, या बुद्धा बनते भी नहीं. I would say like this way. ठीक है, Buddha may have become a god later on, but at that particular point of time was only Siddhartha. So why? Because he could not appreciate the kind of killing that was done in the name of rituals. All right, and इसके साथ बहुत सारे और associated भी problems society में आना शुरू हो गए थे. We'll talk about all these things in our next class. So we'll keep it till here only. ठीक है, तो अभी हम सोसाइटी तक ये रखते हैं, फिर आगे हम बढ़ेंगे तो इसके बारे में बात करेंगे कैसे फिर सोसाइटी पे और डिविजन्स आना शुरू हुए और कैसे दिस सो कॉल्ड classification between Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra became very rigid in later Vedic time. And because of that only, society got completely classified on the basis of this Varna. This Varna here became a part of the caste system that was on the birth. So on the birth, you would be designated as a particular caste. Fine. That is how in later Vedic time it actually got concretized in India. ठीक है, उसका हम आगे चर्चा करेंगे. So we will complete this particular issue in next class only. नेक्स्ट क्लास में हम वैदिक पीरियड भी खत्म करेंगे, लेटर वैदिक पीरियड भी खत्म करेंगे. ठीक है, तो आज इतना ही रखते हैं. फाइन. इफ यू हैव एनी स्पेसिफिक क्वेश्चन कैन आस्क, वी कैन कंक्लूड द क्लास टुडे. ठीक है, तो अभी इतना ही रखिए. ठीक है, और जैसा मैंने समझाया था, इसके साथ साथ एक जैसे कि अगर आज ही मौका मिले तो एनसीईआरटी पूरा पढ़ जाइए. ठीक है, एनसीईआरटी का जो वैदिक वाला जो चैप्टर है, ऋग्वेदा वाला चैप्टर है, आज पूरा पढ़ जाइए. ठीक है, 1 घंटे बाद 2 घंटे बाद जब भी टाइम मिले पढ़ के देख लीजिए. आपको समझ में आएगा कि हाँ कैसे हिस्ट्री अनफोल्ड हो रहा है, और आपको समझ में आ जाएगा. आपको लगेगा कि सब आपके दिमाग में घूम रहा है, क्या क्या अभी हमने जस्ट चर्चा की थी, और वो सब एग्जैक्टली आप पढ़ रहे हो. ठीक है, तो ये कर लीजिए, इससे आपका काम आसान हो जाएगा. ठीक, सी यू देन अगेन. ठीक है, टिल देन टेक केयर, गुड बाय. ओके,
Thank you, sir.
ओके, बाय बाय, टेक केयर.